Lately you've been feeling alone. It's not a coincidence, it's a consequence. And if it hurts, it's because you still don't understand what's really happening. Every time you look at your phone and find no messages, every time a weekend goes by with no plans, every time you realize that no one is looking for you, you feel that emptiness in your chest. But let me tell you something no one is going to tell you. That loneliness is not the problem. It's the sign that you're finally doing something right. Because loneliness doesn't arrive by accident. It arrives when you start growing faster than your environment. It arrives when you stop fitting into superficial conversations, when your priorities change, when you no longer settle for mediocrity. And people notice. They don't say anything, but they drift away. Not because you're different, but because your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Machiavelli knew it centuries ago. Real power is built in solitude, because that's where there are no distractions, no external voices contaminating your decisions, no masks to maintain. Loneliness is the price of transformation, and if you're paying it, congratulations, you're on the right path. But of course, no one prepared you for this. They told you that you need people around you, that being alone is a sign of failure, that happiness is found surrounded by friends. Lie. The truth is that most of the people you have around aren't there because they value you. They're there because you serve them. Your entertainment, your validation. You're the one who listens to their problems while they ignore yours. And when you decide to stop being useful, when you start prioritizing your growth over their needs, they disappear. That's simple. It wasn't friendship. It was convenience disguised as such. And that hurts, I know, because it makes you question everything. You wonder if you were worth it, if you did something wrong, if you're destined to be alone. But the right question is another one. Did you really lose something valuable? Or did the mask simply fall? Because here's the brutal truth. Loneliness shows you who you were when you were surrounded by noise. It forces you to look at yourself without filters, without the distorted mirror of other people's opinions. And that's terrifying, because you discover that much of what you thought you were was just an act to fit in. Machiavelli wrote that the prince must learn to be alone, because in solitude the decisions that change destiny are forged. He wasn't talking about physical isolation, he was talking about mental independence. He was talking about building a core so solid that external storms don't move it. And that is only achieved when you stop needing constant approval, when you stop seeking validation in every interaction. Most people live connected but empty, surrounded but alone, talking but saying nothing. They have hundreds of contacts and no real connection. You, on the other hand, are experiencing the opposite. Few bonds, but the ones that remain are real. And if no one remains, then you're learning the most important lesson of all: being enough for yourself. Because here's the secret no one mentions. The person who learns to be alone without destroying themselves is the person who can never be manipulated. It's the person who doesn't need crumbs of attention, who doesn't sell themselves for a bit of company. They are free, and freedom always scares others. Think about this. How many times have you compromised your values just to maintain a relationship? How many times have you silenced your real opinion to avoid discomfort? How many times have you pretended interest in empty conversations just so you wouldn't feel excluded? Every one of those times you betrayed yourself. And the worst part is that you didn't even notice. You were too busy filling the void with presences that added nothing. But now that they're gone, that void feels bigger, right? It's not because you need people, it's because you're detoxing. It's withdrawal syndrome from external validation. Your brain is used to getting small doses of dopamine every time someone responds to you, every time they include you, every time they laugh at your jokes. And now that that's gone, you feel the crash. But that discomfort is good. It's the sign that you're breaking the pattern. You're stopping being addicted to approval. Loneliness teaches you something no crowd ever can: who you are when no one is watching. It teaches you your true desires, not the ones you adopted to fit in. It shows you your real fears, not the ones you pretended to have because they were expected. And above all, it forces you to make decisions without the noise of other people's opinions. Because let's be honest, how many important decisions have you made influenced by what others would think? Probably most of them. You chose careers, relationships, jobs, hobbies, all contaminated by fear of judgment. And now, in solitude, you have the opportunity to correct course. You have the opportunity to build a life that is truly yours, not an edited version for public consumption. But that requires courage, because it means accepting that maybe everything you built so far was false. Machiavelli also warned that power attracts parasites. When you have something to offer, when you're useful, people appear. Not for you, but for what you can give them. Attention, money, connections, entertainment, whatever it is. And when you stop offering that, when you decide to invest in yourself instead of giving away your energy, they leave. No drama, they simply disappear. And that's good, even if it doesn't feel like it. Because loneliness is the most effective filter that exists. It eliminates those who are there for convenience and reveals those who are there by choice. If someone stays when you no longer have anything to offer, when you're at your worst, when you're not fun or useful, then that person is worth it. But most don't pass that test. Most disappear at the first sign that you're no longer useful to them. And that's fine, because they free up space for something better. Or for nothing, which is sometimes even better than something mediocre. The great lie of our time is that you need to be constantly connected. Social media, messages, video calls, everything designed to keep you hooked on the presence of others. But that connection is superficial. It's a simulation. It makes you feel accompanied while you're completely alone. You see the edited lives of others and compare them to your unfiltered reality. You see manufactured happiness and compare it to your genuine pain. And each time you feel more alone, even if you have 1,000 contacts. Because true loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of real connection. And nowadays, you can be in a full room and feel completely isolated. So what's the difference between that disguised loneliness and genuine loneliness? The difference is that in genuine loneliness, at least you're honest. You're not pretending, you're not acting, you're not wasting energy maintaining appearances. You're just being, simply being. Now, here comes the part few understand. Loneliness is not the final destination. It's the process. It's the necessary stage before becoming someone who truly matters. Think of any historical figure you admire. Think of the great philosophers, artists, leaders. All of them had periods of intense solitude. Periods where they withdrew from the world to forge themselves. Nietzsche in his mountains, Da Vinci in his studios, Buddha under his tree. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Because greatness is not built amid noise, it's built in silence. And if you're in that silence now, if you feel separated from the world, ask yourself, what am I building? Because if you're only suffering without purpose, then you're wasting the opportunity. But if you're using this time to work on yourself, to develop skills, to clarify your vision, then you're doing exactly what you should be doing. The problem is that loneliness without direction is destructive. If you sit there feeling sorry for yourself, comparing yourself to others, ruminating on why no one calls you, then it's not productive loneliness. It's self-pity in disguise. And self-pity is poison. It keeps you trapped in a cycle of victimhood where you never move forward. Machiavelli had no patience for victims. He said that fortune favors the bold, those who act despite fear, those who move when others freeze. So if you're alone, use it. Use it to read, to learn, to create, to experiment. Use it to become someone so interesting that when you finally return to the world looks for you. Because that's the paradox. When you stop needing people, people need you. When you stop chasing connections, connections chase you. But first you have to pass through the fire of solitude without breaking. And here is the ultimate test. Can you be with yourself without distractions and not hate yourself? That's the question most people avoid. Because when you turn off the screens, when no one else is there, when it's just your mind and you, what do you find? If you find peace, if you find purpose, if you find clarity, then you're on the right path. But if you find anxiety, if you find emptiness, if you find a desperate need to fill the silence with anything at all, then you have work to do. Because the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself. If that relationship is broken, all the others will be too. You can have 1,000 friends and still feel alone if you can't stand yourself. You can be in a relationship and feel empty if you haven't built a solid core. Loneliness forces you to face that. It forces you to ask, who am I without masks? What do I really want? What am I willing to do for it? Machiavelli also understood that real power doesn't come from being loved. It comes from being respected. And respect is not earned by pleasing everyone. It's earned by being unbreakable. It means making hard decisions, moving away from comfort, prioritizing your vision over others' opinions. And that inevitably isolates you. Because people don't respect what they don't understand. And they don't understand someone who doesn't need their approval. They'll call you arrogant, selfish, cold. They'll stop inviting you, stop including you, stop considering you part of the group. And at that moment you have two options. Crawl back, begging for acceptance, or keep moving forward knowing that the price of greatness is temporary solitude. Temporary, because eventually, when you've built something solid, you'll attract people at your level. Not parasites looking for entertainment, but allies seeking growth. Not friends of convenience, but genuine connections based on mutual respect. But to get there, you first have to cross the desert. And the desert is brutal. There are no shortcuts, no easy comfort, no pats on the back. It's just you against your own demons, your own excuses, your own weaknesses. And many don't survive. Many run back to mediocrity because loneliness showed them parts of themselves they weren't ready to face. They prefer familiar noise to revealing silence. They prefer toxic company to being alone. And that is their choice, but it is also their sentence. Because they'll never know who they could have been. They'll never know what they could have built if they'd had the courage to stay alone a little longer. You have that courage, or at least you're developing it. Every day you don't give in. Every day you resist the temptation to return to comfort. Every day you build in silence. You're forging something unbreakable. You're becoming someone who can't be manipulated, who can't be bought, who can't be broken. And that's frightening, because the world doesn't know what to do with people like that. Society is designed for obedient people, for people who need approval, who seek constant validation, who move in herds. Because those people are predictable, controllable, easy to manipulate. But someone who is self-sufficient, someone who doesn't need the crowd's applause, someone who builds their own path without asking permission, that person is dangerous. Dangerous to the system, dangerous to the mediocre, dangerous to everyone who benefits from the status quo. That's why they'll try to pull you back. Not with rational arguments, but with guilt. They'll tell you you're selfish, that you've become distant, that you're not the same anymore. And they're right, you're not the same. You're better, stronger, clearer, but they won't see it that way. Because your growth makes them uncomfortable. Your solitude reminds them of their own cowardice. Your independence shows them their own chains. And that's why they'll try to drag you back. Don't let them. Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved, if you can't be both. But I'll tell you something more. It's better to be alone than in bad company. It's better to walk without witnesses than to surround yourself with people who hold you back. It's better to build in silence than to celebrate in empty company. Because at the end of the day, when you look back, the only thing that will matter is what you built. Not how many likes you had, not how many friends pretended to care, not how many parties you missed. What will matter is whether you had the courage to bet on yourself when no one else did. Whether you had the strength to stay alone when everyone asked you to come back. Whether you had the clarity to see that loneliness wasn't punishment, but a gift. Because here is the final truth no one will tell you. Loneliness is the crucible where titans are forged. It's where weaknesses burn away, and only what's essential remains. It's where excuses die and responsibility is born. It's where you stop blaming the world and start building your own. And if you're there now, if you feel alone, if no one is looking for you, if your messages go unanswered, don't see it as failure. See it as confirmation. Confirmation that you're finally doing something worthwhile. Confirmation that you're growing faster than your environment. Confirmation that the path you chose isn't easy, but it's the right one. Because easy paths are full of people, and the crowd never reaches anything extraordinary. Difficult paths, lonely paths, those are the ones that lead to the top. And at the top, there are always fewer people, but the view is incomparable. Let me tell you something more about that view. When you get there, when you finally reach that place where you no longer need external validation, where your peace doesn't depend on anyone else, something extraordinary happens. You start seeing the world as it is, not as you were told it should be. You see the masks everyone wears, the games everyone plays, the desperation disguised as confidence. And you don't judge it, you simply observe it. Because you've been there, you know that hell, and you made it out. And that experience gives you something invaluable: perspective. Machiavelli spoke of this when he said the prince must be cunning like the fox and strong like the lion. He wasn't talking only about politics, he was talking about psychological survival. The fox observes, analyzes, understands patterns. The lion acts, protects, doesn't let itself be intimidated. And both qualities are born in solitude, because only in solitude do you learn to observe without being observed, to think without being interrupted, to act without asking permission. Most people never develop that duality. They get stuck in a single mode, either too passive, observing from a distance and never acting, or too reactive, acting without thinking, moving on impulse. But you, if you're using your solitude well, are developing both. You're learning to observe patterns, to read between the lines, to understand hidden motivations. And at the same time, you're building the strength to act when necessary, to defend your boundaries, to reject what doesn't serve you. That combination is lethal. It's what separates those who survive from those who dominate. Because surviving is easy. Millions do it every day. But dominating, building something that transcends, leaving a mark that doesn't fade, that requires something more. It requires the ability to be alone without losing yourself, to think without going insane, to act without hesitation. And here's the trick no one mentions. Loneliness doesn't just strengthen you, it also purifies you. It forces you to let go of everything that isn't essential. Those superficial friendships you maintained out of habit, those relationships that drained your energy, those habits you adopted to fit in, all of that falls away when you're alone. And it hurts because every loss feels like a wound. But it's not a wound, it's surgery. You're removing what was sick, what was slowly killing you. And once you heal, once the pain passes, you discover that you're lighter, that you can move faster, think more clearly, act more decisively, because you're no longer carrying the weight of pretending to be someone you're not. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He lived in a brutal era where the weak were devoured and the strong barely survived. And in the midst of that chaos, he wrote his most important texts. Not from a palace, not surrounded by luxury, but in exile, in forced solitude. And it was precisely that solitude that gave him the clarity to see things as they were, not as people wished they were. He wrote about power, about manipulation, about human nature without filters. And he did it without fear, because when you're truly alone, when you've lost everything, the fear of judgment disappears. You have nothing left to lose, and that is the most powerful position you can be in. Think about your own life. How many times have you avoided doing something out of fear of losing what you have? A job you hate, but don't leave because at least it's stable. A relationship that destroys you, but you maintain because at least I'm not alone. Friendships that drain you but you keep because, at least I have someone to go out with. All of those concessions, all of those half measures, all of those decisions based on fear of loneliness. And now that you're alone, now that those crutches are gone, what's stopping you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's terrifying, but it's also liberating. Because for the first time in your life, you can make decisions based on what you truly want, not on what you're afraid of losing. Loneliness also teaches you something fundamental. The difference between being alone and feeling alone. Being alone is a physical state, an external circumstance. Feeling alone is a mental state, an internal interpretation. And most people confuse the two. They think that because they're physically alone, they must feel lonely. But that's not how it works. You can be surrounded by 1,000 people and feel completely isolated. And you can be in the middle of the desert without a soul in sight and feel completely at peace. The difference lies in your relationship with yourself. If you like yourself, if you respect yourself, if you enjoy your own company, then you'll never feel alone, no matter how many people are around you. But if you hate yourself, if you constantly criticize yourself, if you can't stand being with yourself, then you'll always feel alone, even in a crowd. Machiavelli didn't write much about emotional loneliness, but his texts are full of it. He talks about the need to trust only yourself, not to depend on others' loyalty, to build your power on foundations no one else can tear down. And that is essentially what loneliness teaches you. Self-confidence. Not the superficial confidence that comes from others' compliments, but the deep confidence that comes from knowing you've survived your own hells. From knowing that when everything collapsed, you stayed standing. From knowing that when everyone left, you didn't leave yourself. And here's the part no one tells you about self-confidence. It's not something you achieve once and for all. It's something you build day by day, decision by decision. Every time you choose to stay alone instead of returning to what's toxic. Every time you prioritize your growth over others' approval. Every time you act despite fear. Each of those decisions is another brick in the structure of your confidence. And over time, that structure becomes unbreakable. But it doesn't happen magically. It happens because you decide to build even when you don't feel like it, even when it hurts, even when it would be easier to give up. Now, let's talk about the dark side of loneliness, because it's not all growth and strength. There are dangers too. The main one is bitterness. When you're alone for too long without purpose, when you constantly ruminate about why they left you, about what you did wrong, about how unfair life is, you start poisoning yourself. Loneliness without direction turns into resentment, and resentment is cancer of the soul. It eats you from the inside, makes you cynical, makes you see betrayal where there is only indifference. And once you fall into that hole, it's hard to get out. Because resentment is comfortable. It gives you a simple explanation for your pain. The world is bad, people are selfish, everyone is fake. And as long as that's your narrative, you'll never have to face your own responsibility. Machiavelli warned about this too. He said hatred is a double-edged sword. It can motivate you temporarily, but if you hold on to it too long, it destroys you. The same thing happens with loneliness. It can be your forge or your grave, depending on how you use it. If you use it to grow, to develop yourself, to build something valuable, then it's the best investment you'll ever make in your life. But if you use it to wallow in self-pity, to feed your resentment, to convince yourself that the world is against you, then you'll sink deeper than you were before. The choice is yours, but it must be a conscious choice. You can't just let yourself be carried away by the current of your emotions. You have to direct them, channel them, use them. And here's the technique that works. Replace resentment with curiosity. Every time you feel tempted to think, "Why did they leave me?" change the question to, "What can I learn from this?" Every time you want to think, "Everyone is selfish," ask yourself, "What was I looking for in those people that they couldn't give me?" Every time the poison of hatred rises, neutralize it with the antidote of responsibility. It's not your fault they left you, but it's your responsibility what you do afterward. It's not your fault people are selfish, but it's your responsibility to choose who you surround yourself with. It's not your fault the world is unjust, but it's your responsibility to build your own world within that chaos. This is the final lesson of loneliness. It's not about being without people, it's about being with yourself. It's not about isolation, it's about independence. It's not about rejecting connections, it's about being selective with them. Because when you come out the other side, when you've crossed the desert and survived, you don't return looking for just any company. You return looking for connections that are worth it. You return with higher standards, clearer boundaries, a more defined vision. And that scares most people, because you're no longer the people pleaser you used to be. You no longer accept crumbs, you no longer settle for mediocrity, you no longer sacrifice your peace for approval. Machiavelli closed the prince with a warning. In difficult times, the weak look for allies, the strong forge themselves. And this is your difficult time. This is your desert. This is your moment of forging. You can cry about it, you can resist it, you can curse it. Or you can embrace it, you can use it, you can turn it into your advantage. The loneliness you're living is not punishment, it's preparation. You're being prepared for something bigger, something that requires you to be stronger, clearer, more unbreakable. And only loneliness can give you that. Only silence can show you your own voice. Only the absence of others can reveal who you truly are. So embrace your loneliness, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Listen to what it has to teach you. Because when this stage ends, and it will end, you'll be someone completely different. You'll be someone who doesn't need external validation to know their worth. You'll be someone who doesn't break in the absence of others. You'll be someone who builds empires in silence and reveals them only when they're complete. And when you get there, when you are that person, the entire world will change. Not because the world is different, but because you are. Loneliness will have turned you into something the crowd can never touch, never break, never control. And that is what Machiavelli called real power. If this video resonated with you, subscribe and activate the bell, because we'll keep exploring these truths that no one else dares to say. And leave in the comments, necessary solitude. Just those 2 words. I want to know how many are really on this path. See you in the next video.